now that I've finished building the keyboard, I need a case to put in so I don't destroy all my hard work with an electrical shock. So I had a couple ideas initially. My first idea was to build a aluminum frame and bend the edges to create a front and back bezel, and then put wood on the sides. That didn't work, so I realized I couldn't bend the aluminum accurately enough to make it work. So ultimately, I just decided to use an aluminum base, bend it so it has a nice angle, more comfortable to type on, and then build a wooden frame, just a scrap 2x4 around it, to keep it all together and to keep it, secure and safe. So now I'm just going to clamp it into the device. I'm going to bend it by hand to begin with, and then I'm going to use a hammer along with the block of wood so I don't scratch up the aluminum too much to get a nice right angle so I get like the proper angle that I enjoy for typing. So now that the plate's bent properly, I'm going to drop the cap for the marker on the floor, and then I'm going to mark out the keyboard on the plate so I can cut it down and make it nice and compact and fit well. So now I'm just measuring out the keyboard so I know what length to cut the wood to. So now I'm using a table saw to cut out the wood. I'm first just going to cut off a really thin layer off the 2x4. I'm just using a scrap 2x4 for wood. I had nothing else laying around. But it should work. First I'm going to cut off a thin layer to square up the wood, and then I'm going to cut off the actual piece that I'm going to use for the frame of the keyboard. So now I'm just going to mark out the spot where the USB port goes through. Now I'm going to use a drill press to drill it out. Now I'm going to use some tiny files to clean up the edges and square up the hole. So now that all the cutting's done, I'm going to start to put it together. First I'm going to glue it together. I am gluing it together around the base and the keyboard, just to make sure that it's a pretty tight fit, and there's not a lot of tolerance in the assembly, so I'm just making sure that I don't glue it together too tight so I can't fit the keyboard in there, because that would suck. So a day later, after the glue's all dried, I'm just gonna sand down the glue and sand down the edges to clean up my mistakes and stuff. So now the wood part of the case is done, I'm going to stain it up. And then after a day of letting that dry, I'm going to sand down the first layer of stain and then apply the second. So now that the assembly is pretty much done, I'm just going to use some electrical tape to insulate the aluminum base from the keyboard so I don't short out anything, and then put it all together. It was pretty tight fit. It did all fit together though, which is good, and it doesn't fall apart. I didn't need to use like glue or anything to stick it together. Once it was assembled, it all just kind of stayed together, which was good. Here's the final product. It took quite a lot of work. Most of the work went into building the case. It was an interesting experience. I definitely learned a lot, both about building the case and building the keyboard. Um, it turned out alright, I think. In the end, it looks decent enough. Probably should have got some better wood to build the case out of, like something other than just scrap 2x4. And there is some areas here on the edges and stuff where I didn't sand down the wood glue enough, so the stain didn't really apply very nicely. But it's not too noticeable. It definitely is different having a much smaller keyboard. I really miss the arrow keys, but it is nice to have a lot more movement, and it just looks a lot better and more simplistic than a big full-size keyboard that I had before. And definitely the different switch types, that's a cool new feeling. To have like greens, whites, greens, clear, and blue all on the same keyboard is definitely cool. Um, Honestly, if you want to build your own, it's not really worth it unless you're super into mechanical keyboards. Otherwise, I would just buy one because it's a lot of work and it's not cheap at all. So you could probably buy one for the half the price I built this and get an like pretty decent keyboard. The only thing you don't get are the different switch types, but honestly, it's not too much of a difference. So unless you're just super into it and you want to have the experience of building your own keyboard, I would definitely just buy one. So that's it for this video. You can check out part 1 if you want to. Just click on the screen. If you haven't seen that before, that's where I put all the electronics of the keyboard together. And you can subscribe if you want to see me do more DIY tech projects.